Yellow fever has been the scourge of Africa since the 15th century, according to oral accounts of early epidemics. This virus disease is transmitted by mosquitoes, man, other primates, and some mammals are the reservoir. Historically, yellow fever has remained endemic in the rainforest zone favorable to its maintenance cycle between the latitudes of 15 degrees north and 15 degrees south. Yet as of now, this zone is still expanding south into arid habitats. In southern Sudan, the Nuba Mountains are home to a population which, despite its geographic and social isolation, has been repeatedly visited by the virus since 1934. The largest ever epidemic occurred in 1940, with 20,000 cases reported and a mortality of up to 20%. The disease became endemic and kept creeping south. At the Naval Medical Research Unit 3 in Cairo, Egypt, scientists from the Rockefeller Foundation were actively engaged in the study of West Nile and other arboviruses. It was thus decided to undertake a reconnaissance in southern Sudan. The objective was twofold: determine if there had been yellow fever transmission subsequent to 1940, and then find out if the galago, a primate common in tropical Africa, plays a role as a reservoir south of the recognized endemic zone. The opportunity for such investigation was provided by Dr. Mansour, professor of microbiology at the School of Medicine in Khartoum, and the Sudan Veterinary Services. They were undertaking the extermination of all warm-blooded animals in an attempt to eradicate the tsetse fly south of the Bahr el Arab by eliminating the source of blood meals. The fly, which transmits trypanosomiasis, also known as sleeping sickness, had been responsible for a high mortality in cattle. As a result, whole populations of Nilotic indigenous people fled southern Sudan. By interrupting the breeding cycle, it was hoped that people would return to the area and raise cattle, a source of beef which could be exported via Khartoum and Port Sudan. The Namru team went along with the veterinarian teams in charge of eliminating wild animals and canvassed the area from El Obeid to Gogrial, making blood collections from humans and various species of primates. 11 villages were visited. As the DC progresses up the Nile, a golden mosaic of canyons and twisted earth unfolds. This is the Nubian Desert, a mystical palette of ochres and shadows, transfixed by the abysmal gorge of the river. The perpetuity of these arid horizons seems to float in a reddish haze of light, heat, and dust. Much of this is now under the waters of Lake Nasser, because the Aswan Dam was built in the 60s. The city of Khartoum was built in 1821 by the Egyptian army. Its name means elephant trunk, because here the Blue Nile concludes its tumultuous descent from the highlands of Ethiopia and meets in a sweeping curve the White Nile flowing from Uganda. Adjacent to the desert are the irrigated farms of the people who live on the banks of the Nile. The confluence takes place under the bridge linking Khartoum to the industrial hub of Omdurman. The color contrast is noteworthy. These ancient feluccas are still the main mean of transport along and across the river. Lord Kitchener relieved the British forces led by Gordon and besieged in Khartoum for 10 months by the Mahdi. Chinese Gordon, so nicknamed because of his heroic Crimean campaigns, remained defiant until the final assault and was killed. Both statues were removed when Sudan gained its independence. The tomb of the Mahdi is on the other side of the river in Omdurman. It is a holy place of pilgrimage for the Muslim Sudanese. The blue cupola is topped by the Muslim crescent penetrated by a spear, which is the emblem of the Mahdi himself. In front of the laboratory, equipment is loaded onto a jeep. It is loaned by the U.S. Map Service. They are busy mapping the continent of Africa from Cape to Cairo in preparation for the first space flight around the world. Wherever the British arrived, they developed the railway network, and such was the case for Sudan. Khartoum became the hub and a transport point to the Red Sea and Port Sudan. Two other spurs went respectively north to Darfur and south to Kordofan and El Obeid. All heavy material must be hoisted on a flatbed. This Electrolux refrigerator is operated with kerosene and will be indispensable for storage of field-collected specimens. The microbiology department involved in tropical disease research has utilized the railroad system for transporting a laboratory car to various parts of Sudan. Personal effects and more fragile equipment are loaded in this car, which will be pooled at the end of the railway. The tarpaulin will provide shelter when specimens are being brought from the bush. This magnificent steam locomotive will reach El Obeid at the top speed of 35 miles an hour, and there will be only a few places to fill up the water tank. The engineers are putting the last nurturing touches of oil. Recommendations are made. Everything is checked to ensure a safe voyage. The 250-mile train journey ends at El Obeid in central Sudan. This is a road and caravan junction on the migration paths from West Africa. This is also the end of the railroad, and from there the 2,000-mile inland trek to the Nuba Mountains will be on a dirt and sand road, too hard or too soft for driving comfort. Shortgrass savanna, thorny bushes, acacias are the main features of the Cordovan province. As the train stops to take on water, the steam is converted to hot water for tea. This truck, taking an audacious turn, is heavily loaded with equipment and personal baggage from the laboratory car. It also carries the field assistants.